Good morning. My name is Craig Minus, and I'm the Director of Project Management with the Tobes Group, and I have the privilege of being this year's Board President for the Coastal Housing Coalition. Please let me welcome you to the 4th Annual Santa Barbara Housing Conference. We have a fantastic program for you today, from our inspirational keynote speaker to our dynamic workshops and plenary groups. We're confident you'll stay engaged throughout the day. You'll find our agenda on page 3 of your program. And please note that our program offers a total of 3 workshops today, of which you as an attendee have the opportunity to attend 2 of the 3, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. We also hope that you visit our sponsor exhibits out here in the lobby. There's a lot of great work happening in the community. I know the Housing Trust Fund is out there with their workforce housing buyer program. The Green Business Program is out there. Mickey Flax has a great publication out there, and you should pick up a copy. So please stop in and see these booths as well as everyone with us today. The Coastal Housing Coalition is very honored to be hosting this event today. We are an advocacy group specifically focused at providing housing for our workforce. Workforce is commonly defined as those households earning 120 to 200% of AMI. Typically, we're talking about households of 4 earning $90,000 to $150,000 per year. We can't forget about our workforce households, many of which add to the civic and economic stability to the region. Some households in our region have the financial resources to afford the $1 million median home. For others, our community offers subsidized solutions to make housing available. The workforce households are often caught in the middle, not able to afford the median home, and ineligible for housing subsidy programs. Founded in 2005, our board has worked for over a decade on this very important community need. Our efforts include project advocacy, policy advocacy, as well as education. In this time, we've accomplished a lot of great work, which in large part is due to the collaboration with local governmental staff and decision makers. So thank you for your efforts to date. I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge the public officials we have with us today. Please hold your applause till the end. From the City of Carpinteria, John Moyer. From the City of Goleta, Ed Fuller, Robert Miller, Stuart Kasdan, and Paula Perotti. From the City of Santa Barbara, Jason Dominguez, John Campanella, Kathy Murillo, Deborah Schwartz, Michael Jordan, Frank Hodgkiss, Bendy White, Helene Schneider, and Jay Higgins. And from the County of Santa Barbara, Naomi Kovacs, representing Janet Wolf, Elijah Ettinger, representing Salud Cabrajal, and Alma Hernandez from Joan Hartman's office. How about a round of applause? I'd like to also take a moment and thank our sponsors. The overwhelming support for this event is very inspiring. A full list of our sponsors can be found on the back page of your program. Our community is very privileged to have these types of organizations who see the importance of investing in community education events such as this housing conference. Thank you to each and every one of our sponsors, and particularly our platinum and gold sponsors, including UCSB, Yardi Systems, the law offices of Binac, Favre, Archibald Spray, the Tobes Group, and the Ventura Investment Company. I'd also like to thank some volunteers and our in-kind donors today. Mickey Flax and Sybil Rosen, who helped the board of directors organize this event. Holly Garson and Holly King, who are volunteering and managing the American Planning Association and American Institute of Architects professional credits today. So please see them in the lobby if you are looking for credits. Vicki Young, who has done all the flower arrangements. Thank you, Vicki. Area 5.1, who is supplying the wine for a reception this afternoon. You should all thank them. And Paradise Cafe, thank you for the $50 gift card as part of our business card raffle. We will be raffling that off right before our plenary group at the end of the day. So please drop your business card at the CHC booth in the lobby. Also, thank you to Gary Atkins, who is doing our AV and sound today. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to thank the entire Coastal Housing Coalition Board of Directors. We are a working board, so every individual has helped to bring this event to fruition today. Thank you to Olivia Marr with Binac Fauver Archibald and Spray. Thank you to Rochelle Rose with the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History, Greg Wilson with the Santa Barbara Zoo, Ellen Bilstein, Bilstein Architecture and Planning, Steve Fort, Suzanne Elledge, Planning and Permitting, Alyssa Hummer with UCSB, Gelleray Macon, Flower and Associates, Brett McNulty, Recon Environmental, Detty Pikert, RRM Design Group, Lisa Plowman, RRM Design Group, John Standring, Beachside Partners, Raina Stapleman with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, and Barry Tower, Simpler Systems. Our board of directors, how about a round of applause? I'd also like to provide a special recognition to our Housing Conference co-chairs, John Standring and Ellen Bilstein, our Housing Conference coordinator, Rochelle Rose, thank you, and our Coastal Housing Coalition Executive Administrator, Shannon Batcheff. On behalf of the Coastal Housing Coalition Board of Directors, there's one very special thank you that goes out this morning, and that is to Michael Tobes. Since Michael's passing 1 month ago, he has been remembered as a successful businessman, a giving philanthropist, and a community leader. It is most appropriate that we spend a few minutes today honoring him for his commitment to workforce housing. Mike recognized the value of workforce housing early in his career, decades ago, really, and long before it became, a general part of our language. He instinctively knew that to build community, workers needed to live close to jobs and their civic activities. He knew that choice was important. He believed in working hard to build a better world and giving back to the community. He understood that workforce housing was necessary for the success and fabric of the Tri-County communities. He could have concentrated on high-end projects and profitability, yet he chose to find a way to make workforce housing pencil out. I have seen firsthand his care for these communities long after the last door was installed. Mike often toured his properties over the weekends, and come Monday mornings in the office, always had fresh ideas to make them even better. He truly cared for the residents. He was accessible to all buyers and renters, and he would personally get involved in each situation if asked. It was through this passion that Mike established the Tobes Group as an award-winning company committed to building community. I'm so grateful to have worked side by side with such a great man, and it gives me inspiration to help carry on all of the wonderful work to advance workforce housing. To honor Mike's legacy, the Coastal Housing Coalition has proudly established the Michael Tobes Workforce Housing Leadership Award, which will honor a person, group, or entity which best exemplifies workforce housing. Starting next year, our board of directors will seek nominations from the community, and we will recognize one recipient with this award at our annual housing conference. So please join me in a round of applause honoring Michael Tobes. It's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Matthew Fienup. Matthew is an executive director at the Center of Economic Research and Forecasting at California Lutheran University, where he also teaches graduate courses in econometrics and environmental economics. His specialty is applied econometric analysis, the economics of land use, and environmental market. Please help me welcome Matthew Fienup. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. It is a great pleasure to be here. I want to start by thanking Craig and Rochelle and the Coastal Housing Coalition for inviting me. This is a topic that I hope to reveal I'm absolutely passionate about. and it's one that I sort of come at from a number of different angles. So just as a matter of quick introduction, as Craig mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Economic Research and Forecasting at California Lutheran University. I make my home in the city of Ventura and commute to the Thousand Oaks area every day. I've been with the university for 3 years and took over as Executive Director from my predecessor, an economist named Bill Watkins, last November. The Center for Economic Research and Forecasting is really most well known for the economic forecasting work that it's done over the years. So for more than 7 years at California Lutheran University, we produced national and state quarterly economic forecasts, as well as an annual regional forecast. And that forecast gained some real notoriety a year ago when the National Association of Business Economists named us the second most accurate U.S. forecast among 80 professional forecasting houses in the U.S. That are surveyed. The number one forecasting house is Fannie Mae. They obviously have an entire building full of economists, so we consider ourselves in pretty good company in that regard. Now, what I bring to California Lutheran University and the Center for Economic Research and Forecasting is an intense interest in policy. So I'm not a traditional economist, as I'll highlight in a second. I actually had a career as an economic actor for more than a decade. I started a small business in Ventura County. And so I have a real interest in what are the policies that make a difference in economic outcomes, right? And what better forum for having conversations about that than this one here. So just to share with you a little bit, this is my view. This is the view that I had of Santa Barbara for a decade before going back to school to pursue a graduate degree in economics. So I moved to Ventura County in 2000 at the urging of another company. I lived on Catalina Island for 3.5 years teaching marine biology. And I moved here to the Central Coast to start a commercial rock climbing school. And I was a full-time professional climbing guide for a decade. And so this was my view of Santa Barbara, right? And as I recall, this was a 5-island day from 200 feet up a cliff in Rattlesnake Canyon. Now, I call this out because one of the important things if we're going to talk about workforce housing is I want to proclaim that I understand what makes Santa Barbara, Ventura County, the Central Coast so unique. There's an environmental character. There are environmental amenities that are very much worth preserving. And in fact, it was my business for more than a decade to sell those amenities to visitors. And so I understand that there's something there that's worth preserving. What I hope to do is also reject the notion that workforce housing development, building is incompatible with preservation of the unique environmental character of this place. Those things are not mutually exclusive. Now, but an appreciation for the unique character of this place is not only my business, I'd like to argue it's in the genes and the culture of our family. So this is my 7-year-old son who is 5 in this picture, and we've been introducing them to the magnificent places of this region from on a rope from as early as 2 years old. And at the same time that I enjoy and appreciate the unique character of this place, I feel like as a business actor on the Central Coast, I have lived the full Central Coast experience. And that's to say, from the moment I arrived in 1999, I have been struggling to make it go on the Central Coast. I'm married to a corporate businesswoman who relocated here from the Chicago area, working in the biotech industry. And even as a 2-career family, with one of us being admittedly a climbing guide, all right? There's truth to the joke. What's the difference between a climbing guide and a large pizza? Does anybody know? The large pizza will feed a family of 4, right? But I married well, and even as a 2-career family, we were always one relocation, one downsizing, one layoff, away from not being able to make it go on the Central Coast. I've also had employees since 2000, and due to this day, a climbing guide makes $20 an hour plus tips, right? The problem is that's a living wage in some parts of the Central Coast region, but for a climbing guide, sometimes you work 60 hours a week and sometimes you work 10. There's real seasonal fluctuations. So I've seen my employees struggle to make a go on the Central Coast. In many cases, that meant renting an apartment for 3 months during the busy season and then living out of their van during the slow times. Sometimes that meant packing 8 people into a 2-bedroom apartment here in Santa Barbara. And so I sort of feel like I've had a visibility into the issues confronting the Central Coast. And I'd like to say that if I have any credibility to speak on the issue, it's more because of that than because of anything I can say as an economist. Now, again, tying it back to our appreciation of the Central Coast, my family has gone to great lengths to make it work here. That length, just to give you a sense of how big it is all the way from Ventura to Orange County. So Ventura County has undergone a real transformation of its economy over the last decade. The biotech industry is slowly leaving the region, and as my wife's companies downsized, relocated, we actually were offered a chance to move to Chicago. The company laid off 70% of its employees, offered 30% a reload package. We were among the 30%, and we said, no, we're going to try and make a go here. And what that meant was actually my wife, for 2 years, commuting from Ventura, the city of Ventura, to Orange County. She was one of 1,400 residents of Ventura County that drive to Orange County every day for work. Orange County is a unique place. All right, they struggle with different problems. According to the Orange County Business Council, an economist named Wallace Walrod, that I have an affiliation with, they're struggling right now with something they call skills gap. They are producing high-paying jobs so rapidly they can't import people and skilled labor fast enough to fill the jobs. There's this large cluster of industries, a number, financial industry, biotech and medical device industry, and they're producing high-paying jobs. Growth is so rapid, opportunity is so great, they can't bring people in fast enough. And so it's a unique set of challenges relative to what we experience here on the Central Coast. Fortunately, after 2 years, my wife did find a job in LA County, and now she is one of 80,000 Ventura County residents who merely drive to the next county in order to find work that allows them to live in Ventura County. So that's sort of the personal story and where I approach this issue from. Now, you did ask, I wanted to point out too, Craig, I wanted to thank you. Economists are seldomly introduced as inspirational speakers. I hear pessimistic, I hear dour, dark, cynical, okay? So first of all, that was really nice, I appreciate it. Now, there are some things you definitely get. You do get a little cynicism with economists, so just plan on it, so that's where we're going. But you also get graphs, and when you hire an economics professor, you're gonna get a quiz, all right? So here's a little quiz. I wanna start to sort of motivate all of this, all right? I'm going to present you with a little hypothetical economy, right? Let's imagine we're opening up our textbooks, right? And this is not a real economy. Let's just craft an economy, and then I'm going to ask you to make some predictions, right? That's the quiz portion, all right? So let's imagine in an economy that we lost tens of thousands of jobs during the recession, as many parts of the economy did. But as the rest of the economy grew back, recovered, this particular economy, this particular community is still below the pre-recession level of jobs. It lost jobs, and even though it's added tens of thousands of people in terms of population, it still hasn't even recovered the jobs that it lost. All right, in this economy, hopefully you didn't see the answer there. All right. Population growth is near zero. Let's just pick a number, say 0.2%, all right? So this is a tiny fraction of U.S. population growth. Population growth in the U.S. is low. In California, it's low. But in this economy, this part of the economy, it's extremely low. It's basically zero. And for 4 consecutive years, the labor force declined in this area. Right? That means this year, there are fewer people living in this community who have a job than there were the previous year. And that's been true for 4 consecutive years, and that's unprecedented for a non-recessionary economy. We expect labor force to decline in a recession, but not in an era of growth, all right? And because of some of these dynamics, what we see is that net migration is negative every single year. In fact, for 13 consecutive years, more people left this region to seek economic opportunity elsewhere than came to this region. All right? So this is our little hypothetical economy here. Jobs haven't recovered, population growth is zero, labor force is in decline, and people are leaving the area every year. Now, first of all, Detroit or the coastal California? Which one is this more likely to be? Wow, who are the cynics? Goodness. I heard some people say coastal California, all right? And is this the Central Valley in California, or is this coastal California? All right, well, obviously where we're headed is this has got to be coastal California, right? Now here's the real question. Here's the quiz that matters. What would you predict about home prices in this economy? This is a quiz, all right? You have to use economic theory. What should be happening if we were to draw a graph? They should be plummeting, right? All right, if I were to graph it on this screen, I would need a hole in the stage, right, for the line to keep going down. That's what should be happening. Well, in this economy, home prices continue to soar. And this is no textbook economy, as you already know. This is Ventura County, California. So as of December 2016, jobs had not recovered from the pre-recession level. The jobs that have come back don't even look anything like the ones we lost, right? But this economy is below, as of December. We actually just passed it in the first quarter, but as of December, was the only county in all of Southern California that was below pre-recession levels. Population growth is 0, labor force decline for 4 years, and net migration is negative. Yet, not only have home prices soared, they have recovered well over 90% of their pre-recession high. So now what this is here, home prices don't, as many of the people in the room know, are sort of a misleading indicator because home prices don't tell you anything about affordability, right? Home prices can be very high, but if incomes are very high, then it makes sense that you would have higher prices. That's certainly the case in parts of Orange County. Incomes are very high, economic opportunity is high, and therefore home prices can be high. Now here, let's see if this thing works. All right, and actually what you can see here is this is a value adjusted measure of housing affordability. So what we do here is we simply take the median home price and divide it by the median income and create what's called a median multiple. Now you can see here as recently as the mid-90s, the median multiple was less than 3.5 in Ventura County. And the threshold 2 to 3 is one to actually think about, all right? For every metropolitan region, metropolitan statistical area to an economist outside of California, the median multiple is somewhere between 2 and 3 for almost every metropolitan region in all of the United States outside of California. They were actually between 2 and 3 in California as recently as the late 70s and early 80s. We tend to think as residents of coastal California, oh, it was always more expensive. Actually, not in terms of affordability, right? As recently as the 80s, on an affordability adjusted basis, housing prices were about the same as they were in other metropolitan statistical areas outside. St. Louis, Missouri, all right? If you read my bio, I think on one of the things it says we're big Cardinals baseball fans. We're also St. Louis fans. St. Louis is the most affordable metropolitan statistical area in the United States with a median multiple of 1.8. So it merely takes 1.8 years median income to buy the median house. Now, and you can see in Ventura County, we are currently at 7.2, and not that far from the mania days of 2004 and 2005. Now, I want to talk about the difference between these two humps really briefly. Now, what's important here, all right, actually, and I should admit, at the risk of completely undermining my credibility as an economist, that I bought a house in 2004 in Ventura. And I think the story is illustrative, all right? So again, my wife and I were recently married. We were buying our first home together in California. She had moved out not long before from the Midwest. And even as a 2-income household, one of which had a very stable corporate job, we thought we had been priced out of the single-family home market. We thought we simply couldn't afford, and this is, again, a woman moving from Chicago, who had a townhouse that she thought was unbelievably expensive in Chicago. And a house happened to come on the market that we could afford. We were going to have exactly one choice in the housing market. Now, the opening for the house began at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a weekday. It actually turned out that it had a renter that had lived in it for 7 years who had 4 dogs and was a chain smoker. Right? When you went into the master bath, The entire ceiling, it had a large bathtub with a skylight. The ceiling was covered in nicotine stains that actually we never got out, no matter how many layers of primer we put over it. All right? At 3 o'clock, the opening began. At 3:15, my wife and I made an offer for more than asking, which was accepted on the spot, which was good because by 3:30, they had received 3 other offers above asking. All right, so these are the manic days of 2004 and 2005. And what you remember is that these were not housing values that were sustained by any underlying measure of value, right? This was fueled by basically a lack of underwriting standards, by federal policies that drove lending and home ownership, and it was driven by prospectors, people who thought, I can use the gain on one house as down payment for the next, if they even require a down payment. I can rent it out, and I can accrue millions of dollars of real estate, right? And so that's what was happening here in 2004 and 5. Now, what I want to argue is it's a different dynamic here, right? These are not the same days of easy credit. In fact, we actually sold a house a few years later and bought an even bigger one, doubled down with a bigger mortgage, and refinanced it when interest rates were low. And if you've been through that process, you know there is oral surgery that is more pleasant than a refinance these days. So this is not easy credit, all right? And so what I want to argue here is that this is something very different. There's the surge in home values since the recession, especially in Ventura County, is simply fueled by a complete lack of developable land. We have achieved build-out, and I don't necessarily mean physical build-out. Amazingly, there's open parcels, but we've reached regulatory build-out, where either the land has some environmental finding that prohibits development, or it simply has a stakeholder group with a particular attachment to that parcel who is going to pack city council meetings and is going to make sure that development never happens in that place, all right? And so this is a story of a lack of supply as opposed to excess demand, which is what drove it in the early days. So this is the story of housing affordability. Now, in Ventura County, the causes are pretty clear. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about Ventura County's attitudes and policies related to growth, and then try and make some generalizations that apply to the Central Coast. But Ventura County is a unique one from a perspective of academic research because the policy boundaries are so clearly defined, right? And in fact, it turns out that this makes a pretty good dissertation topic. So in the mid-90s, what Ventura County did, very forward-thinking, they decided we want to preserve open space and the unique environmental character of this place. We kept hearing we don't want to be Orange County, and we also want to preserve a robust agricultural economy. So right between the cities of Camarillo, Oxnard, and Ventura, there's 55,000 acres of the most valuable agricultural land in the world, right? Agricultural land, which can never be developed, still sells for as much as $140,000 an acre. All right, you compare that to $2,000 to $4,000 in other parts of the country. It's shocking. So in the mid-90s, what we passed was first a set of city ballot initiatives and a county-wide ballot initiative that imposed urban growth boundaries around Ventura County. And what that did was it fixed the ag-urban or the urban-rural interface so that there could be no expansion outside of existing growth boundaries. And what's unique about this policy is it actually wrested control away from local planners. City councils, the county board of supervisors, planning commissions have no say in land use change in Ventura County. Who does is the electorate. Land use change, significant land use change, requires a majority vote of the entire electorate. And so that's to say we have the strictest land use policies in the entire United States. I challenge you to find a county that's more stringent. And so the consequences become pretty predictable. This is actually from just a few weeks ago in the Ventura County Star. This was also reported in the Pacific Coast Business Times. Amgen announced that they were reducing their local workforce by 10%, and they are actually creating 500 new positions in Tampa, Florida. And the reason that they cited for this relocation, the primary reason they said was the actual cost of housing for employees. So like my wife's company, Baxter Bioscience, which did its relocation, Amgen has trouble attracting and retaining talented professionals because even though incomes are high, the standard of living that an employee in those sectors must suffer here is different than what you can enjoy in other parts of the country. And what that means is that this is not just Amgen, not just Baxter Bioscience. This is part of a remaking of the economy in Ventura County. And post-recession, net job losses are concentrated in high-paying sectors, and the jobs we're creating are in low-paying sectors. So increasingly, Ventura County is becoming a bimodal economy with very wealthy people and a service sector economy that works for them. And so we see here construction, manufacturing, and finance are all down more than 20% and losing every single year. And leisure and hospitality, education and healthcare are up 20 to 40%. Now, what's interesting here is to note that non-durable manufacturing, that's what Amgen does in Thousand Oaks. Non-durable manufacturing, the average economic output per employee is more than 10 times the economic product per employee in education and healthcare. So what that means is that there cannot be incomes in those other sectors, low-paying sectors, that you would find in the sectors like construction, manufacturing, and finance. Now, I'll talk a little bit about how Santa Barbara is different. Santa Barbara has actually created jobs in manufacturing post-recession and has also generated jobs in information and technology, another high-paying sector. Because Santa Barbara has a slightly different situation, especially with the incredible resource that you have just here on the coast, UC Santa Barbara, and the incredible creative engine that it is. So Santa Barbara definitely has some resources and assets going for it. Now back to Ventura County, what this means is that it's just very, very difficult for the workforce to make a go. And so what we see here is these bars are numbers from MIT. They actually will look at metropolitan statistical areas and calculate the living wage for various life stages in that metropolitan region. So you can see here a living wage for one adult is $13 an hour in Ventura County. Living wage for one adult with 3 children is $40 an hour. Now again, a climbing guide, all right, is actually right about here. Now what you can see is that the overwhelming majority of industries, right, just don't have incomes that allow you to buy a home, that even allow you to rent quality rental units and make a life in Ventura County. In fact, for living wage for one adult and 3 children, only architecture and engineering, management, and legal actually have average incomes sufficient to meet those needs. What that means is that in Ventura County, we see increasing economic inequality and declining economic mobility. This is called the Brookings Institution Metro Monitor. And what they do every year is they look at the 100 largest metropolitan areas, and they actually rate them on a number of characteristics. Growth, how much growth have you experienced in the last year, in the last 5 years, in the last 10 years? How much prosperity is there, all right? And then lastly, how broadly shared is the prosperity? They have a measure called inclusion, which says, okay, if it's a prosperous community, how broadly shared is it? Do people at all stages of the career ladder, do people at all stages of the income ladder enjoy the quality of life and the prosperity of that place? And so this is Oxnard, Thousand Oaks, Ventura for the period 2010 to 2015, the most recent period for which there's data. We actually had the 90th growth out of 100, so there were only 10 communities that had slower growth than Ventura County. And this one is what's really shocking to me is we were number 82 out of 100 for inclusion, right? So we have some of the greatest economic inequality that you'll find in metropolitan statistical areas. Unfortunately, Santa Barbara isn't one of the largest 100 metropolitan areas, so I can't translate this directly to Santa Barbara. Now, there was one year that was particularly shocking, 2013 to 14. In that year, Oxnard was 95th out of 100. And now, one of the things I want to push back on is a lot of people say, well, you know, you're arguing that the housing prices, the lack of workforce housing is a driver of broader economic agendas. what I always hear is, well, let's just go up to the Bay Area. In the Bay Area, they have incredibly high housing prices, much, much higher than what you have in Santa Barbara and Ventura. Well, what's interesting, again, is that the dynamics are very different. Orange County, the Bay Area, has economic growth, upward economic mobility, and incomes to support higher home prices. And so what I found really interesting was that in the same year as Oxnard Thousand Oaks took 95th out of 100, San Jose, Sunnyvale, and Santa Clara was 11 out of 100 across the United States. They were the 11th most inclusive economy in the US. So that's a story of growth driving economic opportunity and driving upward mobility, despite actually having high home prices, right? They have economic opportunity, which fuels their home prices, as opposed to the lack of supply, which is what's fueling high home prices on the Central Coast in California. All right, so what economic mobility means on the Central Coast, one thing it means is commuting. So right now in Ventura County, 80,000 people, I mentioned, leave the county every single day to find a job that lets them work in Ventura County. 40,000 people drive into the county every day, mostly to work in low-wage service sector jobs that don't allow them to afford to live here. So they live in LA County and commute in to work in the low-wage service sectors. That's 120,000 people crossing on the freeway. The numbers in Santa Barbara are a little different. It's 10,000 and 20,000. You can, to compare to Ventura, you should double those because Santa Barbara County, the population is only half that of Ventura County. So Santa Barbara sees a similar, a related pattern in commuting driven by the availability of workforce housing. And then, of course, Santa Barbara has its own commuter culture within the county, right? Commuting across the Santa Ynez Mountains between North County and South County. And so the pattern that we see in Ventura County, I think, holds to large measure locally. This is actually from the Ventura County Civic Alliance, who tracks these things very closely. They actually find that in Ventura County there are 55,000 workers who live in Ventura County who have an average daily commute of 45 minutes or more. And so that's 55,000. That's 1 of every 7 residents of Ventura County who has a job drives 45 minutes or more, and 11,000 who drive 90 minutes or more in order to find work. And so economic mobility also, as I mentioned, means leaving the county. So this is net domestic migration that I alluded to in the quiz. And what you can see here is that for 13 consecutive years, if the bar is below the line, more people left the county than came to the county from other areas, right? So people are leaving Ventura County to seek economic opportunity. And so this is sort of the pattern, the forces and the consequences. Now, I want to talk a little bit about attitudes about growth, the effect on workforce housing more broadly. And so what I want to acknowledge is that what's happened in Ventura County is really part of a broad cultural pattern, cultural political event that happened in California in the years 1992 to 2002. So in that time, what we saw was that 48 municipalities in California passed urban growth restrictions, not unlike Ventura County's. Ventura County's was merely the strictest. And many of those restrictions were modeled after urban growth boundaries imposed in Portland, Oregon. So anyone who works in planning is familiar with Oregon's statewide land use planning system. They require every city in the state to actually create urban growth boundaries. And then there's rules about how those tools are used. In Oregon, every 10 years, the growth boundary must be moved to accommodate future growth. And they're actually expected to forecast housing needs. And urban growth boundaries are used as a tool to decide where growth happens, as opposed to being a moratorium on growth. Right? And then planners decide, okay, where's the best place for urban margins to expand to accommodate housing needs. So that's Oregon. As I mentioned, in Ventura County, ours were unique. We were passed by direct ballot initiative. There's no consideration of future population growth, and any change to growth boundaries must be approved by the county electorate. We're merely the strictest and most clearly defined example of that. Now, what's the effect of these policies? Well, economic theory makes some predictions. Obviously, we already know that if a parcel of land that's not developed has development pressure, if it might be developed in the future, then that value of future development is capitalized into land values now. There's nothing controversial about that. In one study of Los Angeles, 50% of current land values can be explained merely by the option to develop in the future. Obviously, now, any time that that development right is taken away through regulation, we expect to see a profound impact on land values. That's one of the ways that attitudes and policies related to growth impact economic outcomes. Now, urban growth restrictions, the interesting thing there is when we consider them, they affect land values and home prices, the availability of workforce housing in a number of ways. And where it gets a little confusing is some of the effects work in different directions. So first of all, there's a restriction effect. If you are one of the parcels of land that can no longer be developed, you're restricted from being put to your highest best use, there's going to be a decrease, a negative impact on land values for that particular parcel. The dominant effect in many cases is a scarcity effect. By reducing the amount of developable land, there's a strong upward pressure on the values of existing developed land and on prices of homes at every level of cost. And then there's an amenity effect, and this one is important because it's one I believe in, and it's one that's cited often by folks that take a particularly restrictive view of economic growth and development. Preserving open space, preserving environmental amenities does increase the value of homes, and we would expect that, right? And in fact, my wife and I demonstrate we will go to great lengths in many cases to live in a place that has unique environmental character, availability of open space in the outdoors nearby. So what all this looks like is that just from economic theory, if absent any regulation, right, if we just chart what land values and accordingly home prices look like relative to the city center. So we're holding everything constant, the slope, what the soil is, the distance from major freeways, right? All we're measuring here is the distance from the city center. As we move from left to right on this graph, we would expect land values and home prices to decrease smoothly as we move farther from the city center. What urban growth restrictions usually do is here you can see there's a scarcity effect where within areas that development is allowed, we expect home prices, land values and home prices to jump considerably because of the scarcity of developable land. There's a restriction effect where land that can no longer be developed decreases in value. And as a result, we can see dramatic impacts on home prices and land values as a result. And the question is, and one of the things that's of real economic interest to me, academic interest to me, is what's that magnitude? What's the gap that's caused by attitudes and policies related to growth? Well, there's lots and lots of scholarship, 35 years of it looking at this. We'll go quickly. You can see there's 6 or so studies there showing that yes, there's a big impact on land values and home prices. In Portland, Oregon, growth boundaries are nice because it gives you such a clear demarcation. They're really nice from a research perspective. You can see that the effect can be between $30,000 and $140,000 an acre. I actually can find evidence of a much larger effect in coastal California. A nationwide survey by Matt Turner. This is in the most prestigious economic statistics journal in the world. Matthew Turner did a nationwide survey and found that land use restrictions reduce aggregate welfare. Communities are worse off than they would be than the condition of no restriction, and strict land use regulations increase income segregation. Now this is the view down one of our growth boundaries. They're called city-urban restriction boundaries. And what's remarkable in Ventura County is I can actually find, this is prime industrial land on the left, prime agricultural land on the right, and there's a difference of $800,000 an acre just on either side of that street. That's to say, if we moved the growth boundary one parcel, that parcel would increase in value $800,000 an acre. Now, in Santa Barbara, the situation is a little different. You don't use growth boundaries, and the dynamics are a little different. There's other policies restricting growth. I highlight this just to show there is a profound impact All right, growth restriction, attitudes about growth have the potential to have huge impacts on the value of land and home prices as a result of it, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars an acre. So that's to say attitudes and policies matter. This is another study that was done by a demographer in Southern California. What he did is he looked at all of the metropolitan statistical areas and he looked at zoning laws, he looked at building rates of building permits, and he saw sort of a bimodal distribution. There were some statistical areas that embraced development and growth. There were ones that were restrictive. And so he just assigned a value to each of those. This one's restrictive, this one's not. And 25% of metropolitan areas were deemed restrictive. 75% had more open attitudes about growth. And what he did is he tracked those statistical areas, those metropolitan areas, through the recession. And in the 25% that were really restrictive, they saw an average increase in home prices of 112% in the years leading up to the financial crisis. In Ventura County, we saw a 100% increase in home values in 4 years. Right? In the other 75 regions, 75% of metropolitan areas, the average increase, this is St. Louis, Missouri, was just 28% over that same period. All right? So policies and attitudes related to growth matter. During the crash, $1.8 trillion of losses were concentrated in the minority of metropolitan areas that had attitudes and policies restricting growth. And the other majority of metropolitan areas only saw $0.16 trillion in losses. So this is to say, again, that the impact of attitudes and policies related to growth has huge impacts on workforce housing, relative housing affordability, and it even impacts broader economic patterns, all right? So the dramatic effects of growth restrictions has implications. It affects business location decisions. It affects level and composition of jobs, total economic output, welfare, income inequality, and traffic, all right? So one of the arguments I often hear in Ventura County is that we don't want traffic. We can't allow development because we don't want traffic. All right, attitudes and policies restricting reasonable development of workforce housing increases traffic. It does not decrease traffic. All right, there are 120,000 people sorting themselves on the 101 freeway in Ventura County because of the lack of workforce housing. Now, I do want to quickly touch on the broader tri-county view. I've held up Ventura County as one of the starkest examples of this pattern, and I showed you earlier the median multiples were now 7.2 in Ventura County. And it won't surprise you to learn that in Santa Barbara County, the median multiple is considerably higher than it is in Ventura County. Now, admittedly, some of this is because of attitudes and policies related to development. Some of this is also because of there is greater economic opportunity right now in Santa Barbara County than in Ventura County. You have amazing assets like UC Santa Barbara, and you can even outcompete us on amenities. And so some of that is the story. Looking beyond house prices, you know, ownership is only one part of the workforce housing issue. Rent is another one. And so what I did here is we just took median rent by county, and what you'll see here, it might actually surprise you to learn that the red bar is Ventura. Median rents in Ventura are actually considerably higher than they are in Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara is the green line. And then it's hard to read in this slide, but the orange bar just to the left of Ventura is San Francisco, okay? That's sort of a meaningful milestone as we consider counties, all right? Now, I'm setting you up here because I already said from the beginning that prices alone, nominal prices, don't tell us the whole story. It's the relationship between prices and income that are the most meaningful as it relates to workforce housing. And so what we did the same thing with rents, where we said what share of income, of the median income, is needed to pay the median rent. And this is pretty stark. So the green bar is Santa Barbara, California. All right, only Mendocino is less affordable to renters than Santa Barbara. Ventura County, actually, because believe it or not, incomes are higher in Ventura County than Santa Barbara County because you have the North County, South County dynamic. So Ventura actually does pretty well. We're pretty close to the middle. But this one to me is shocking. That's San Francisco, California. San Francisco is among the most affordable counties in all of California when you include incomes as part of the mix. And so remember that San Francisco was way over here, and now it's way over here. And actually, Marin is way over here. Marin was one on the far left. So this is sort of part of the broader tri-county view. Now, I mentioned I'm arguing that, that workforce housing, this issue has broader impacts on the economy. And I want to hold up as evidence this. So what the yellow bars here show is the average growth rate for all of California. Right? And California enjoys a growth premium over the rest of the nation. Right? We have incredible natural resources, auspicious geography. We're close. We're the best ports for Asian markets. We have a legacy of technological and creative innovation in California between Hollywood and the Bay Area. And so California enjoys a growth premium. Right? And that growth premium is largely fueled by the Bay Area. So the green line, you can see their growth is considerably higher. In fact, it pulls up the state average. This was a little surprising to me. This, Southern California follows the average. That actually isn't what was surprising, but the Central Coast actually enjoys job growth that's very similar to the state at large. And welcome to the party. This is us right here. This is the Central Coast, the blue line, and you can see that the blue line has systematically underperformed the rest of the state in the post-recession era, right, coming out of the recession. So job growth has lagged every other region of the state by a substantial margin. All right, I showed you this earlier, net domestic migration. To us, this is a really important indicator of real economic dynamics. This is individuals and households making decisions about relative economic opportunity. Is the opportunity greater here, or is it greater somewhere else? And Ventura County, for 13 consecutive years, has had negative net domestic migration. Santa Barbara County has been negative for much of the time since the 90s, with some, again, promising developments here. 4 of the last 5 years, more people have moved into the county to seek opportunity than have left it. Now, I have to caution this, as optimistic as those 4 years are, the magnitude is very, very small. That's very close to zero net migration. And when you look at who is migrating, that is all happening in the age range of 19 to 27 years old. All right, so this is people moving in and out largely through the UC and the amazing community college system here in Santa Barbara. But what the good news is that many of those who are coming in are actually finding a way, starting a business, creating some new technology, and some of them are actually able to stay. And that's a legacy that Santa Barbara can really be proud of. Now, in terms of further evidence, I guess as we talk about this issue, one of the things I would encourage you to do is not listen to economists, but listen to the economic actors in the place. And so this is from Ventura County, so it's further evidence. Listen to the businesses. These are all of the major relocations or defections. And so farmers, J.D. Power moved their facilities from Ventura County to LA County in search of a friendlier business environment. And frankly, in search of optimal office and industrial space, right? We've reached build out. I'm embarrassed to say California Lutheran University wanted to start an entrepreneurship hub, Hub 101. It's actually where my office is, where the Center for Economic Research and Forecasting is. We could not find adequate commercial space in Ventura County, and we set up in LA County. I am one of the 80,000 people that leaves the county every day to go to work. And so Ventura County Star is just moving its production to LA County. Amgen, Baxter was eventually turned into Shire. They've had 3 rounds of local downsizing. And so listen to the businesses. This is a survey by the Los Angeles County Business Federation. BizFed is the name. And they conduct exit surveys on businesses that are leaving the city of Los Angeles. And they say, why did you leave? 2/3 of businesses leaving the city of Los Angeles cite housing affordability as a major driver of their relocation. The Silicon Valley Leadership Group in 2004 conducted a survey, so this is in the Bay Area. 72% of CEOs reported housing costs for employees is the single biggest challenge confronting businesses. And then the Coastal Housing Coalition, let's look local. In their most recent report, 81.7% of businesses reported being negatively impacted by the lack and cost of housing. And 74% of businesses reported that lack and cost of housing made it a lot or somewhat difficult to retain employees who want to rent a home. The number was 73% regarding ownership. So what's the alternative? Well, what I would encourage is rooms like this, right? I'm actually a bit of a subsidiarian. I think there's actually discussion right now. There are 100 bills working through the California legislature related to housing. And many of those bills actually involve plans for the state to seize control of planning and land use changes in local communities, in those communities that are deemed to not build enough housing, affordable and workforce housing. I'm a real subsidiarian. I think nobody knows local conditions as well as you. Nobody can possibly make the challenging decisions in terms of costs and benefits, in terms of trade-offs that any development involves than local actors. But I would encourage an all options on the table approach. Obviously, Santa Barbara already has density incentives. In San Luis Obispo, a pretty unique process was undertaken where the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Vitality Corporation actually hosted a series of workshops and produced a policy statement, right? These are meaningful changes that we would like to see made on the part of the county in order to drive infill development. As part of that process, also created a unique thing called ag clustering, where you can actually cluster, if you have low density zoning, right, you can actually all cluster the developments along a common boundary and permanently preserve as open space the areas around those. So there were some unique policy solutions. Those are stakeholder processes that were driven by local economic actors. There's tools that I think can be brought to bear in workforce housing that are traditionally used in other avenues. So easements, conservation banking, and land trusts, right? We can all think of successful examples of environmental conservation efforts and the use of banking and land trusts. And I actually think in Ventura County, we are having conversations with some of the open space conservancies because the money is drying up. And so there is an opportunity to trade in Ventura County modest expansion of urban areas, all right, in the areas that are best to do that, and in exchange for permanent preservation of open space and sensitive habitat. And so there is, I think, a nexus between environmental conservancies and workforce housing organizations. And then there's an interesting one, housing land trusts. There's an event at CLU next week where we're inviting down someone from Sonoma who runs an affordable housing land trust, where the land trust idea was taken out of environmental conservation, and they have a system where developers can get expedited processing of permits and other issues, and in exchange for permanently setting land aside for development of affordable housing. Obviously, there's employer-sponsored housing. There's other tools. And then there's widespread systematic ways. Tradable development rights are one that we're talking about in Ventura County. I hold up Montgomery County, Maryland, as the example. So in Montgomery County, Maryland, it's a metropolitan area right outside of DC. It actually has a population of 900,000, so it's very similar to Ventura County. Very high income because of its proximity to Washington, D.C. And what they do there, this is actually Ventura County, but I'll use this as an example. What they do is they identify areas that they think are especially important for preservation. They have an agricultural economy they want to support, so they identify agricultural lands that they want to keep in production. Here in Ventura County, we have the Santa Clara River. They identify environmentally sensitive areas, and they say these are the sending areas. This is where we want to retire development rights. And then what they say is, well, we want to expand development in this area, so what we'll do is we'll allow developers that right, and all they need to do is go retire a certain number of development rights in another area. And what's beautiful about the system they have in Montgomery County, Maryland, is that the cost-benefit analysis is internalized, right? Rather than through regulatory fiat setting land aside, they go find where can we get the biggest preservation bang for the buck. And then they go to landowners and make them whole. They say, what would it cost to make you indifferent between developing and not developing on this land? And the bargain is that then you get a reasonable regulatory process for moving development forward. And Montgomery County, Maryland's unique because they preserved 55,000 acres since the 1980s using a system of tradable development rights. That number is meaningful to me because that's exactly the area of that prime agricultural land that I talked about in Ventura County. And so they've been doing this since the 80s. And the model is so successful that Pennsylvania and New Jersey now have statewide tradable development rights. So again, this is sort of an economist's dream. It's a market transaction that actually balances preservation and development. But what I really think is necessary is, again, economic actors in a room together, putting all options on the table, and then, importantly, speaking with one voice, public, private, nonprofit voices, all speaking with the same voice. And so I want to hold up, just as my conclusion here, that fundamental change is still possible. I am arguing today that fundamental change is needed, all right, that serious attention needs to be paid to the issue of workforce housing. The issue is having an impact on broader economic outcomes, especially here on the Central Coast, but fundamental change is still possible. And so I just want to talk, this is kind of an allegory. For the last 3 years, I've been involved in some work in Ventura County related to the drought. And so I've been interested in water management coming out of the Bren School. I'm still at the Bren School, but coming out of the classroom days at the Bren School of Environmental Science at UC Santa Barbara, and using markets to solve big policy problems. And so 3 years ago, all anyone wanted to talk about was water because of the drought. And again, we have real tension between ag and cities in Ventura County, and even between ag and the environment, because we have an endangered species finding on the Santa Clara River, as you do on the Santa Ynez River here in Santa Barbara. And an amazing process unfolded. I started talking one-on-one with farmers, trying to build consensus around a set of ideas on fundamentally changing how we allocate groundwater. And instead of politically allocating water, using a market to do it. After about a year, just in small groups, sitting at tables no bigger than this, we developed some momentum as a group among ag, and then we went to the regulators. We very carefully met one-on-one with the regulators that mattered and said, hey, here's a set of ideas. What do you think of this? Now, what was unique is that at the very beginning, the farmer said, this is insane, you're wasting your breath, this will never happen in California. Right? After we had consensus among farmers, we went to the regulators. We said, hey, farmers are serious about cutting water. Right? They understand pain is coming. They want flexibility to adapt. Here's what they propose, fixed allocations. We're going to cap and trade water. And the regulators are funny. They said, this sounds awesome, but the farmers would never go along with this. Right? And we said, well, that's funny. They're in the other room. And then we expanded the stakeholder process to include cities. We then got very, very, very important buy-in from the environmental community. The Nature Conservancy became one of the most important partners in the development of fundamental policy changes. Last December, so I actually facilitated a stakeholder process for 7 months with cities, farmers, and environmentalists in a room, sometimes yelling at each other, listening though at the same time, working through compromises. And at the end of the process, last September, that group unanimously approved a set of proposals to advance to the regulator. In December, the regulator unanimously approved the recommendations. And in January, we actually opened a water market pilot where we're actually using market mechanisms to fundamentally transform how water's managed, to meet environmental goals, and to give economic actors flexibility to adapt over time. And incentives where they benefit from conservation. And so what's been good is this has been really heartening, all right? Again, because 3 years ago, people told us we were wasting our breath. And now we're standing here with a real policy change to show for it. And I believe the conversation that I'm hearing in Santa Barbara and Ventura, the volume is ratcheted up in the area of workforce housing. And I feel like we're at that stage we were 3 years ago, where people are still saying, you're wasting your breath. Fundamental changes like tradable development rights are never coming to Ventura County. But we've already built large consensus around the nature of the problem and at least a list of possible approaches to addressing it. So I think this is an incredibly important and also a hopeful area. And I really appreciate that all of you are here in the room, not just to listen to me, but more importantly to share ideas and sort of lay all this out on the table. And so with that, I thank you very much for your time and invite your questions. Questions? Yes, sir.
So you mentioned scarcity of land driving up the prices. One of the things that we hear quite a bit on the other side of that argument is that there is insatiable demand on the Central Coast. In other words, we have a corrupted demand curve because the demand can never be met. So how do you argue? We hear that frequently sometimes
Sure.
from the affordable community. So how do you?
Population growth is 0.2%.
Right, and it is a tiny fraction of what it is elsewhere. So so I don't see
Insatiable desire. What we hear in Ventura County is we are one policy change away from Orange County, and I reject the premise. I don't believe it's true because again, we're not talking about paving over every single open space in Santa Barbara. We're not talking about doubling the density of development, in city centers, right? We're talking about really changing attitudes about growth and just fostering, an environment that's supportive of business creation, that's supportive of, and again, I don't think demand is insatiable.
So as a quick follow-up to that, if we add supply, will that help affordability? Because sometimes we hear the argument.
Yes.
Thank you. Everybody heard that.
So I thought your talk was great. It was full of facts, and everything you said struck me as true. What I'm concerned about is what we didn't talk about, or what you didn't talk about. You didn't define workforce housing, and this last statement about adding supply brings down prices. That's true, but it's categorical. So you're adding supply at the high end, it brings down prices potentially.
Yep, I agree. There's an important conversation to have about what we build. I'm not the guy that should give that talk, to be totally candid. You are the people that should have that talk. But I will to reinforce your point. You are absolutely right. In Ventura County, the building that we do is at the high end, and that is why median rent is so much higher in Ventura than it is even in Santa Barbara. We are not building multifamily attached housing. We do these one-offs with 10 really large houses here, 8 really large houses there. And you're right, we're not meeting the needs at the various levels. So I agree with you completely.
Okay, and you did mention inclusionary housing.
Yeah.
I didn't know if that was because that's no longer one of the options, but it seems like that's what people are doing around the state, but not in Santa Barbara. So do you have a perspective on that, or what would economic principles say about that?
Well, why don't you tell me, so when you say inclusionary housing, what do you mean specifically?
Either setting aside units,
Yeah.
setting aside units outside of the area. So for example, we're trying to build affordable housing downtown,
Yeah.
which as you pointed out with your graph, is the worst place to try to build affordable housing unless you're going to somehow subsidize it.
Yeah, so again, I don't know what the right mix of affordable workforce housing and other types of housing are. I don't know I can't tell you we need 10,000 units of this and 5,000 units of that. What I say is we need more of all of it. And so I wouldn't discourage any of those efforts. I do agree with you. You can make an argument that even where we do some of these things is not the right place. So even the limited building that we're doing may not be the right building. I agree with you completely.
How do you define workforce housing?
So again, in this case, they've defined pretty clearly what it means in this case, which is, what's the number? Where's Craig? 1.2, Rochelle, 1.2 to 2 times AMIs. Yep. What I mean in this case is, in Ventura County, right, what are the sectors that are declining because they can't attract and retain talent? Those are finance, those are information and technology, those are
manufacturing. In Ventura County, those are incomes between
$120,000 and $250,000. And that's the housing in Ventura County that's lacking.
So the Urban Land Institute defines it as 60 to 120, and that's what most states and cities call workforce housing.
Yep, cool. Yes, yeah.
I don't recall seeing in your slides factors that include socioeconomic and environmental economic issues such as the 120,000 commuters you have who are not living in Ventura County, for example, your county. We could say the same for Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
So who are not living in, working and playing in their communities and invested in their communities and therefore economically contributing for the most part in their
You bet.
communities. So do you have any, have you done any analysis or analyses on that in terms of its effect on some of these
I don't.
outputs for Ventura County?
Yeah, I don't in terms of economic impact of that, or for that matter, environmental impact. The reason I mention the commuting one is because it's often an environmental argument that's made that, in fact, I'm thinking of a political campaign we had just last year in Ventura County where we renewed a set of policies to 2050 where it showed the tailpipe and emissions coming out of the tailpipe, and that was the argument for constraining development in Ventura County. I believe that the effect is exactly the opposite of the one that's claimed, that I think tailpipe emissions are increased and traffic is increased because of people being pushed onto the freeways. Yeah.
Impact of aging population.
Yeah, this is
Staying in place.
This is a great question. Well, so there's two aspects of this. And so one of the things I have to be careful of is when I say that the labor force is declining in Ventura County, some of that is to be expected because we're undergoing a demographic shift that's unprecedented. In fact, part of the reason the labor force is declining in Ventura County is because people are retiring and trying to retire in place. And so that is definitely part of the story that moderates some of those numbers that I'm showing you. That is, it could even be, by some economists, explaining half of the effect. So it is not insignificant. So that is important as you consider the graphs and other arguments that I've made. Some of this is demographic and to be expected. There is an issue in Ventura County is about how possible is it to retire in place. And so when I show those net domestic migration numbers, what's interesting there is there's a bimodal distribution of people leaving the county. There's actually older people, high-income people leaving the county because actually Ventura County is, as my colleague Bill Watkins used to say rather crassly, he just moved to Tennessee. Ventura County is a very expensive place to die. And so he was not able to retire in place, and so he moved to Tennessee. And then at the lower end, there's younger families and lower middle class families that are leaving, and those are the two populations. So part of the story is actually it's very difficult to retire in place. And so that's part of the sorting that's happening demographically. Mickey.
They sound trivial, but I
Yeah.
think it's significant. We have here in town talked about small A and large A affordable housing.
Yeah.
Capital A is subsidized
Yep.
housing.
Yep.
It applies to lower income folks. Small A is how everything is affordable to somebody.
Yep.
Everything is affordable to somebody.
Right. Yep.
So the question is what to call and what to think about workforce housing. Workforce housing implies that the population below that economically isn't working, which isn't true.
Right.
So there's been some thought of using a different term.
Yeah.
I prefer
And-
middle income housing or big A.
Yeah, and actually,
Small A.
as the gentleman sitting behind you may have revealed, I am abusing language in my presentation. I say housing affordability, right? And I'm approaching this from a land use economist, and we use a very different language than the economic development community uses, than the workforce housing and affordable housing communities use. So I agree. Part of my message is, the success we enjoyed in changing water policy was everyone getting around the table, agreeing to use the same language, actually defining what the problem was, so that there was consensus around the nature of the problem. As this gentleman alluded to, what development do we need at different levels, and then speaking with one voice on behalf of those needs. Yeah, words matter. Okay, one more question. There's an enthusiastic hand.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
In Santa Barbara, we've had, until recently, a very specific issue. It's been my understanding that investing in commercial real estate and rental properties is a very good return for the people that do so. And yet it seems in our community that we've had more people investing in what is called a second home, don't live here, rent it out, short-term vacation rentals.
Yep.
And there's a real emphasis in Santa Barbara on tourism,
Yep.
as opposed to really supporting and encouraging more industry, such as the tech and whatever, behind to the businesses who are
Yep.
trying to do something wonderful in the
Yep.
community. So what are your suggestions in terms of getting that balance to change so that there is more investment in creating housing as opposed to just more of a tourism industry in
Yeah.
our community?
So what I would argue is that the reason that money can flow into some industries like tourism is because there aren't the regulatory barriers that there are to move into other areas, into developing workforce housing and that sort of thing. And so so in that case, I would certainly not argue that there be policies shifting the channels of investment from one sector of the economy to another, because it's just so hard to micromanage an economy at that scale. But I think that the pattern you're identifying might simply be explained by the fact that there's so many regulatory barriers to investment in a certain area of the economy that investors seek opportunity elsewhere. Risk matters to investment decisions. In Ventura County right now, the story that I hear is that the entitlement process is lengthy. Even if you get a permit approved, it might be 12, 15 years until the first door actually opens and closes. And you're financing an investment over the length of that, and you're adding tens of thousands of dollars to the cost of any unit of anything that's built. And so, of course, investors are going to seek opportunity where the risk is lower and where the return is more immediate. And so I think the conversation you're having today about the need for workforce housing needs to address those barriers and how do you free investment to flow into that sector of the economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.